Hey, this week I thought I'd show you a few really promising demos I've played recently. However, I won't waste your time here. I've included timestamps for each, so watch in whatever order you wish. One of them is even releasing pretty damn soon, so enjoy. Holstin is an isometric, side-scrolling, top-down, 2D, 3D, pixel art survival horror game that is also a driving game, platformer, and an over-the-shoulder third-person shooter or something along those lines. Still with me? Look, the good news is that Holstin's strength goes far beyond trying to cram every perspective into one video game. There is some really solid potential here. In this game, you are a man on the hunt for his friend Bartek, who has disappeared within a small, isolated town in eastern Poland, ravaged by an apocalyptic event known simply as the Change. Sorry, wrong game. Struck by a foul calamity that slowly begins to consume everything it touches. You are here to investigate your friend's disappearance and are most definitely getting wrapped up in something far grander than you intended. If you're not aware, that clip was from my review of Bloober Team's Chronos: The New Dawn, set in 1980s Poland, in a world being consumed by a pretty similar foul calamity. Anyways, an interesting thing to note here is that the inhabitants of this town are very much ignorant to all of the horrors unfolding before their very eyes. They speak weird, they act weird, it's as if they're all blind and being gaslit into thinking it's just another Tuesday in Poland. Which, hey, look, I've never been. There are a precious few people that seem lucid, and even then it's hard to tell. With a solid runtime of 2 hours, I remained really intrigued by this and would have played more just to find out what was up with these people, if I could have. As for gameplay, it certainly has its quirks like I mentioned in the beginning, but at its heart it is a classic survival horror video game. I spent the majority of my time solving little puzzles, toying with my inventory to make everything fit, and exploring a place filled with monstrosities for me to fight with whatever I had scrounged up on the way. It is telling that I was very quickly able to figure out that I could make medicine from herbs and alcohol, or bullets from gunpowder and nails, and was frustrated that I couldn't combine anything until the game told me what I already knew. To specify, when I said puzzles before, they were mostly, the finding a crank to open a gate, to get a crowbar, to open a door kind of thing. That being said, there are definitely a few classic puzzles sprinkled in there, and I can almost guarantee that the full game will evolve in that regard. The level design was solid. I can't speak for more than the prologue, and those are often a little more linear in these games, but what I was able to get my hands on was engaging. This first level was relatively interconnected and looped back into itself a few times, which is always nice, and there was already a healthy amount of extra or side content. I really can't let them get away with the red paint thing though. You can trust us. Well, most of us will find our way eventually. Although maybe they've backed themselves into a corner here because there are a fair few places that I definitely should have been able to go, things that I should have been able to climb over, but couldn't for the lack of red paint. If you have any experience with this genre, the crux of the combat will be comfortable for you. The melee combat, on the other hand, is surprisingly more reminiscent of Project Zomboid in both good and bad ways. It was definitely a little finicky to guarantee a hit. Like any other survival horror title, immersion is so very valuable, and they absolutely nail it. Not only is the sound design top notch, but the voice acting, wow. I mean, I don't speak Polish, so any intricacies are beyond me, but it is chock full of emotion.
Słuchaj, Mati,
Tak, słucham, proszę. To Tomasz.
wszystko w porządku?
Tak, tak, jak najbardziej.
I was seriously impressed, and very rarely did I have to fight the urge to skip through any dialogue. So this one really hooked me, and I'm hopeful for a positive release. Maybe one day I'll be able to dive back in, find Bartek, and most importantly, the reason why no one seems to acknowledge anything in this town. I implore you to check it out. Holstin, as far as I'm aware, has no official release date as of today, but the Steam page will still be linked in the description if you're interested. Legends of the Round Table catapults you into the clogs of High King Arthur. Though this is no action RPG, it's more akin to a CRPG that I'd wager is partly inspired by the secondary management minigames, quote unquote, of Owlcat Games' Pathfinder series, and more recently Warhammer 40,000's Rogue Trader. This is realized in a glorious coat of paint, reminiscent of 13th century medieval manuscripts, from what I think still constitutes a 2.5D perspective. I'm not yet on board with the character designs themselves, but it all looks a lot like a stage play to me, and I can always get behind something unique. The world is like Pentiment with saturation turned up to 11. The music is simple but faithfully composed on lutes, harps, and the UI is Kingdom Come Deliverance if there were even more numbers to keep track of. Yes, it is definitely very cluttered. Segueing into explaining those numbers, I can't. Not fully. It may be a little less complicated than your average role-playing rule set, but it's still a world more twisted than most RPGs I've experienced. You have around 40 million stats per character to keep track of, with the caveat that as a system it does seem to just work. I didn't totally understand probably half of what I was doing, but the intended result always came around in the end. These numbers feed into a turn-based combat system that is nothing if not unique. I don't think the demo was quite expansive enough to fully review something so seemingly complex. So for now, just think of it as your standard CRPG turn-based system with a quasi deck building mechanic to give you further control over all of those little unseen numbers we are always begging to land in our favor. The way the characters move and fight is super satisfyingly animated and takes me back to playing Shadow Fight. Any of you remember that game? I played it on my iPod Touch. I know there have been many sequels, but the original was such a bombshell to little me. I think a few animations here are either missing or a tad dodgy looking, but as a package, they do make the fighting far less tedious than it otherwise could have been. The management portion of the game, and what I believe will become a principal aspect, seemed a little rudimentary, but I must say that I really had no more than like 10 minutes with it, and I just can't see that being enough to sway me in either direction. In a nutshell, you are tasked with managing the round table, commanding your knights to do many different things. The most involved of those things being questing, which is the standard exploratory CRPG gameplay. The time jumps, even in the small bite this demo offers, lead me to believe this game is going to incorporate features from more interactive novel-like titles spanning many years and or decades, like The Life and Suffering of Sir Bronte or Suzerain, the latter of which is a big offhand recommendation from me. That's probably one of my favorite visual novel games. Though I will say that as it stands, it's somewhat hard to tell whether the characters will be given enough material to grow and become memorable, to become more than the numbers that they were in this demo. They aren't really voice acted. In fact, the game is primarily narrated by one person, and it's not bad, but I still unfortunately had to mute it. I think it is definitely no fault of the voice itself, rather it seems English is not her first language, so the intonation made it feel a little awkward.
Lot of Orkney is powerful and fearsome, both on the battlefield and at court. He grips his allies' hearts with fear and sows terror among his enemies. He must surely be coming to terms with his failure to remove the sword from the stone.
Now, what I just said is obviously causal, but as a result, the cutscenes ended up feeling pretty silent. I do find it weird, however, that there was a distinct lack of music in a few scenes that read like they were meant to be dramatic. Among a few other sounds here and there, it ended up giving like silent disco with your headphones off a little bit. I know it was mostly my fault, but that's something to note. The writing itself was standard. I wasn't blown away by engaging poetry and prose, nor was I really wearing down the skip button trying to get it over with. I felt as if I could have been given a little more control over dialogue. Almost every choice was neither a choice or really real dialogue. Rather, there are mostly just questions to ask. Decisions aren't really made in conversation, if you understand what I mean. Rounding this all up, it's tough to say whether the supposed complexity and unique direction in Legends of the Round Table will remain intriguing and entertaining beyond the 2-hour runtime of the demo, but I can safely say that it is a game worth keeping on your radar, if only for its bold palette in gameplay and visuals. Oh, and don't let me forget, if anyone on the dev team happens to come across this video, please, you have to remove the bell sound in the main menu. It's atrocious, please, and thank you. Legends of the Round Table seems to be slated for an early 2026 release. There'll be a link to the Steam page in the description. Rue Valley is far and away my favorite demo of the bunch. Think Disco Elysium, but in a time loop. I would be shocked if that didn't score a wishlist from you immediately. In this game, you are in the mind of one Mr. Harrow, sent to a sleepy town for therapy it seems. It's rather depressing in the beginning, a very milquetoast consultation, a sad wander around a parking lot that eventually leads to a sorry little motel room. You know, you talk to some people, and then you go to sleep. It doesn't last long though. A call wakes you up from the most honest to goodness legal agency, Ulterior Paralegal Exploits Consultancy. What a name. Claiming you've been unjustly forced to participate in a treatment not aligned with your best interests and that they'd like to represent you. Later in the night, a man hurriedly and clumsily drives out of the parking lot. It's all a little peculiar, but whatever. Then the sky explodes and you're back in therapy. The demo doesn't allow you to go much farther than that, but I can say now that I am more than intrigued. And it helps that this game looks outstanding. I mean, some of the most well-crafted visuals I have ever laid eyes upon. The colors pop without being oversaturated. Sunlight envelops the world and casts very intentional shadows. Reflections and rain-soaked concrete set the tone. I'm serious, it is gorgeous in every sense of the word. There are some minor clipping issues here and there, but other than that, it is smooth and polished as all hell. The atmosphere here is very well done. Every sound effect, every music track blends into a background symphony that holds your attention without distracting you. That is really all I can ever ask for in a game. It is voiced soundly, professionally. Look, Denzel Washington isn't in the booth, but I have zero complaints. Now, it plays very much like Disco Elysium, down to the inner monologue. Mr. Harrow is a semi-blank slate for you to influence. His personality is yours to direct, and it is the driving force in every single interaction. If he's too introverted, he's unable to strike up a conversation. If he's too flat, he can't really emotionally engage with anyone. And if he's too indecisive, he might not even be able to unpack the suitcase on his bed and will be forced to sleep in an armchair. Look, for as much as I played, which was around an hour and 15, I was already overwhelmed with the possibility of all the little ways every interaction could go differently. It seems like your personality is the crux of your ability to change the story. The dialogue choices are actually secondary here. When I said you are in the mind of Mr. Harrow, I mean it. You influence his thoughts, his motivations, his desires. You can reference his memories and connect them to form inspirations, goals. The Steam page tells me you're able to give him all sorts of quirky mindsets and personality-altering status effects. While I didn't experience any of that in such a short demo, I'm on board. Obviously, the replayability could just be off the charts for this one. I have no idea how expansive this game might be. Whether we'll be stuck in this motel or if we'll be able to explore all of Rue Valley. I've heard that it's 20 hours long actually, which seems overkill if it's limited to such a small location. Whatever it ends up being, I am beyond sure of this recommendation. In fact, beyond wishlisting it, I think you should take the demo for a spin yourself and see what I'm talking about. It is worth more than a hard look. Rue Valley will be out in just over a month on the 12th of November, and as expected, there'll be a link to the Steam page in the description. And that's it for the roundup. Thanks.